The document or the social document in photography is going to rise to importance prompted by the Great Depression, which occurs beginning with the stock market crash in 1929, but it's going to last throughout the 30s and really well into World War II. In this period, we're going to have high unemployment. We're going to have lots of labor displacement and labor problems. We're also going to have difficulties of poverty, particularly in the Midwest, but throughout the country. But in the Midwest, there are going to be lots of farmers that, due to droughts that occur at the same time, are going to lose their property and become themselves migrant workers moving from place to place. To deal with this situation, the President of the United States, President Roosevelt, comes up with what he calls the New Deal to give relief to the people of the United States. One of his programs within the New Deal is the FSA, which stands for Farm Security Administration. And it's going to run from 1935 to the 1940s in the era of the Second World War, when it is going to change its character. This was an attempt, a government program, which was paid for by taxpayers' dollars, to document the conditions of farmers in the United States, excuse me, and of people who had been pushed off their land or people who were victims of the Depression. Okay, why are we doing this? Well, a couple of reasons. One is to justify the federal expenditures that are being used, essentially the aid that is being given to these people, by convincing taxpayers that these people need our assistance. The other is simply to give jobs to photographers, another group of workers who are unemployed in this incredibly difficult period of the Depression. Okay, there are two images on the screen right now. Both of these are icons of the Depression. The one that's on the left is by Arthur Rothstein, and it's figure 9.5 in our textbook. And this deals specifically with the Midwest and with the Dust Bowl conditions in the Midwest. The drought that was causing crops to die, people not to be able, who were farming the land, not to be able to pay their mortgages, and being essentially driven off of their land. This is a highly effective image because it looks bleak, it looks desolate, it looks empty. It looks like there's nothing there to help these people who seem to be seeking shelter from a dust storm. Probably the most effective element in this photograph, in fact, is the little kid who is on the furthest right-hand portion of the image. He raises his arm up to protect his eyes from the storm, as all of the figures look like they're being pushed by the wind away from the direction that they're heading. We tend to react to children and children in need, and this is a photograph that successfully does that. It also gives us the sense of being there. It's a very powerful image. It was taken in Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, in fact, the photographer actually suffered eye damage due to a dust storm. So what you're looking at, in fact, is a great reality. The Rothstein photograph, however, is not as well known as figure 9.3, which is Dorothea Lange's migrant mother, which was shot in 1936. Let me say something about Dorothea Lange so that we can get a little bit of an appreciation of where she's coming from. She did some of the best work found in the FSA, and she did it in the 1930s, focusing on the plight of individuals hit by the Depression. She is ours. She was born in Hoboken, New Jersey, and her particular focus is on social justice, trying to get equality, trying to get help for the individual. She cares very much about people. Her photographs are about humans and the plights that they find themselves in. She is a true humanist. At the age of 7, Dorothea Lange developed polio, and it left her with a problem walking, a slight limp. It has been suggested that this experience left her very sensitive to the suffering of others. Maybe that's the cause, maybe it isn't. but what we do know is her photographs document her concern and care for solving problems that other people are experiencing. She did go and work in the studio of Clarence White for a while. She studied with White, but she does not come away with any of his pictorialism. Instead, she focuses on crisp, clear images that can be used for purposes of social document. And during the Depression, her concern for the plight of others was brought to the attention of the guy who was in charge of the FSA section dealing with photographers. His name was Roy Stryker. You're going to hear that name again. Mr. Stryker is a pretty important player. And he decides, based on looking at some of Lange's photos, to hire her into the FSA in 1935. Her first assignment was to go to Nimpoma, which is where a pea crop had failed. It had frozen in the fields, and that's what we're looking at, the results for this particular family of the lost crop, the lost work, and the lost revenue. This is an image, clearly the migrant worker, the migrant mother, that focuses on people, the human element. Dorothea Lange conveys through gesture and expression a storyline. So there's a narrative element to this picture, focusing on the emotions and the situations of the people and attempting to create a picture that's going to sum that all up. Okay, in terms of gesture, I think we need to talk about the hand of the woman that is raised to her face in a thoughtful way, perhaps a melancholy pose that's traditionally understood this way. Think of Rodin's thinker, someone who's trying to come up with a solution, but it also seems as if it's bracing her face a little bit, suggesting the woman is in a really terrible position and she's trying to find an answer, trying to find a solution. Her expression on her face and her eyes seem to look into the distance as if she's seeking solutions, as if she's seeking a way out of her situation. Okay, what is her situation? She, like 2,500 migrant workers, were at a camp. They had gone there, a farm camp, with the intention of harvesting a crop of peas. Unfortunately for everybody, the pea crop froze and nothing was salvageable. So that means that all of these people were stuck at the camp. They could not make any wages, so they couldn't get the money that they needed to buy the food, or perhaps in some cases to even move on to another camp. Dorothy Lange arrived at the camp, and out of the 2,500 people, selected this woman and did ask if the woman would be willing to allow Dorothea Lange to take her photograph. Dorothea Lange shot 7 pictures. This is the one that becomes the famous one. When you work for FSA, that's the government basically, you get paid to take the photograph. The photograph does not belong to you, however, so it's government property. Once the photograph is taken, the FSA decides what to do with the photograph, and that means it can be captioned in any way that the FSA or any news agency wishes to, and it can also be cropped. And I am assuming that this particular image has been cropped to get very close to the subjects in the photograph. This is, and we did find the identity of this woman much later in the 1970s. The woman's name is Florence Thompson. She was a widow, and she was solely responsible for the welfare of her children. She has in the photograph 3 of them, a very small one, I'm going to call it an infant, on her lap, and 2 other children very tightly concentrated around mom, as if seeking the protection of mom, but also turning away from the camera. The concentration of the images within the frame is part of what makes this a powerful picture. It's very, very tightly composed, and also, of course, it deals with children. The woman's clothing is tattered. The figures also are dirty, indicating the hardships and the fact that they've been on the road for an extended period of time. This particular picture did the trick. It went into the newspapers, and immediately the papers began hearing from the public with a great outpouring of concern and hope that somebody would do something to help these individuals. Food, in fact, was sent into the camp. The government was prompted to do that. And essentially, the power of the picture is registering here, having the impact that photography can, causing people to care. And that's what a good social document is supposed to do. The photo represents or perhaps symbolizes the strength and determination of individuals during the Depression, and perhaps the qualities that were required to survive the Depression. Sadly, I guess I need to say that Florence Thompson, the subject of this photograph, actually never benefited directly from the picture because she took her family out of the camp before the food arrived. And she never received any money for the photograph, despite the fact that it became published commonly throughout the United States, and it became an iconic image of the Depression and the hardship of individuals during the Depression. Dorothea Lange actually shot 7 photos of the migrant mother, Florence Thompson, and these are some of them so you can get a look at what her other attempts were like. And by comparison, I think it's pretty clear that the one that became famous deserves the fame that's associated with it. I think you can also see that what makes it work so well is that the photograph comes in very close to the subject, and is a very tight composition, giving strength to the unit of the family and the dependence of the children on the mother. Okay, just another set of photographs to take a look at. They are all by Dorothea Lange. The one that's on the left is called Heading West, and it too focuses on the human element through gesture and expression. Dorothea Lange had a great amount of compassion for her subjects, and I think that comes through in the image that we're looking at. She claims she does not organize the subjects into a composition, but she carefully frames her photos based upon what the subjects provide for her. And probably I buy that. The one that's on the left is a very strong image. The mother and 2 children. There's a diagonal linking all of these 3 figures together. The mother has an expression, I think, of despair, of the difficulties facing her, almost conveying on her face a kind of lack of focus, representing the life of people on the road who've lost their homes, who've been uprooted, and have all of their possessions with them in probably a ramshackled vehicle. The children also seem dirty and disheveled in appearance. This becomes a universal statement of human suffering. It's a kind of monumentalized image. You can find a triangle in the grouping of figures if you'd like to, which gives it a monumentality and a stability, or you can also run along the lines of the faces of our figures, and that would be this away here, and that would suggest the movement along the faces along a diagonal line. The images that are located on the right are just background to show you what the people Dorothea Lange was shooting actually look like. They were literally homeless people who had vehicles that they put all of their stuff in, and it was tied on the top, it was tied on the back, and they survived by living or by working in various camps as migrant farm workers. It was a time of deep trouble for many people in America.